Good morning, ladies. And this is for Judy. Judy just wrote to me and said, I can't get on. The reason you couldn't get on is because I hadn't started yet. So now I started. So hopefully you can jump on now. So glad you're right there. You should see this pop up in a minute. So how's everyone? Thank you all for giving me grace last week. Oh my gosh. I know some of you suffer from migraines, so you totally know what that's about. And honestly, it wasn't a horrible one. On a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it was a 4, enough that I had to take a pill. And the pills totally eliminate the migraine. But I feel like I'm on drugs after I take that pill. I feel like just so washed out, just like worth nothing. So man, I just needed a couple days to catch my breath and recuperate. So anyway, thank you ladies. You're always so kind and understanding. So, okay, boy, we have 4 people on already. We'll get started right away. Let me swipe this so I can see comments and see, sometimes I see when you jump on, but not always. Okay, so today we're talking about finding common ground. The reason we need to find common ground, I don't need to tell you, but maybe you're not sure where I was going with this. I don't even have to tell you what the world is like right now. The world is so ugly as far as humans getting along, so divisive, so hateful. I have never seen anything to this degree, probably in my life. It's so funny. I see so many people saying, so what good things have come out of 2020 for you? And honestly, the good things, I've had good things in my life all year long. And I'm just the personality that chooses to really focus on the good things. So I can always find good things in my life and things that I'm extremely thankful for and things that really make me happy. So in that sense, 2020 was no worse than no different than any other year. So what good came out of 2020? What good do I think came out of the political climate or the pandemic or anything that's going on this year? I hate to say it, but I can't say anything because I feel like all it's done, like I said, is just cause people to be so hateful, break so many relationships. There's such divisiveness. I can't see the good. So here's the problem. We've had so many huge issues going on this year that any common ground that we need to find has been so piled on by so much shit. Pardon my French, but that's mild. Comparing 20, in explaining what 2020 has been all about, that common ground is so deep that I don't know, some days I think, can we even dig through all this crap to find it again? This crap has been piled so high this year, but we have to work hard to change that. We really, truly do. But it's harder to find it. When it's buried that deep, it's a lot harder to find the common ground that we need to make us whole again, to make us one again. So we know why it's happening. I'm just going to quickly say it, but I'm probably not going to tell you anything you don't already know. It's happening, number one, because we're making assumptions. We're making assumptions, not just about other people, but even about ourselves. Again, so many issues this year, but in all those issues, we all have different points of view. Okay, I don't have to tell you that. Politics has us on 2 different sides of things. This pandemic has us on 2 different sides of things. And we make assumptions. We make assumptions of ourselves, believing that what we believe is the righteous way to believe. And we make assumptions that if somebody doesn't believe the way we do, that they're like extreme to the far other end of this whole topic. For instance, the pandemic, okay? I believe we all have to, I'm not saying I believe, this is an example, hypothetical. I believe we have to limit our exposure to people. We have to wear masks all the time. We have to not go out unless it's a necessity. That is the only way we're going to cure the virus. And my assumption about myself is that I am listening to science, I am listening to the doctors, and I care about humanity and I don't want people to die unnecessarily. My assumption about you, if you don't feel that exact same way about it, is that you don't care if people die. Right? That's exactly what we're hearing. I mean, we just saw a new Supreme Court justice sworn in last night. But oh my gosh, to see the polar opposite sides of people's reaction to that, we've all lost common sense. We all know, if you really think about it, we all know that every one of us and every one of these situations and these stories we're making up probably falls somewhere more in the middle, not one end or another. You know, if you're for Biden, I can't assume that you believe it's okay to have a pedophile in the White House. If you support Trump, I can't assume that you just want a liar and an egotistical maniac and all this and all this other stuff. We make assumptions about one another that aren't just little assumptions, they're big assumptions. Like, you don't care if people die. The person you think that about, do you really think that's true? Of course that's not true. Everything falls somewhere in the middle. And yet we're getting extreme, but we're making these assumptions, and that's something we need to stop doing. So what we have to understand is there are root differences between all of us that are really difficult for us to bridge sometimes, right? And so we have to accept the fact that we have different points of view. I mean, yeah, we know we do. It's easy to say it. It's easy to say, yeah, I accept that. But then as soon as you start talking about COVID or start talking about politics, you wouldn't know you believed it, because suddenly anybody who doesn't think the way you do, you make the assumption that they're like all the way out there, and they're not. When you look at that, we have different opinions, and we've got to accept the fact that we don't agree on everything, right? And in that, we have two different perspectives, okay? We're looking at the exact same thing, like the appointment last night of the Supreme Court Justice. We're looking at that exact same event. But you know what? It's like drawing the number 6 on the ground. When I look at it from my side, I'm seeing a 6. And when you look at it from your side, you're seeing a 9. Now, we're seeing two totally conflicting things. A 6 is not a 9. In any world, a 6 is not a 9. Without turning it upside down, a 6 is not a 9. But we're looking at the exact same thing. That's what's happening with all these situations. We are looking at the exact same situation, but we have a totally different perspective and interpretation of it. And that's what we have to start respecting, is that we have different ideas. We have different opinions. It doesn't make you right or me wrong. You're totally right that you're looking at a 9, and I'm totally right that I'm looking at a 6. So we need to stop being so, we need to stop assuming and then being so judgmental because of that, because that's what we're doing. And listen, I'm looking at it, you're looking at it, we're seeing two different things. And people talk about, okay, do your fact checking, all this. I guarantee you that I can do just as much fact checking as you, and we can both find enough evidence to support what we believe. You know that's true. If I want to believe that the earth is flat, I guarantee you I could Google and find enough evidence to support that belief. I'm not saying whether it's true or not. I'm saying there are people that believe that, and they believe they have proof to support that. So all the facts in the world, don't be judgmental. Don't assume that people aren't fact checking all this. We just have to start accepting the fact we don't think the same. And one step farther, we are not responsible for changing the way people think. We cannot assume of ourselves that we are so self-righteous and we are the only ones believing the truth that it is now our job to change the way people think, because it's not your job. And my daughter brought up the idea for this topic today, and it was based on the fact that her church is doing a series right now, and it's actually called Uncommon Ground. But, take that one step farther into religion. Everybody doesn't believe in the same religion. Absolutely. Does it mean you're right and I'm wrong? Everybody totally believes they're right. Am I right? I mean, there's nothing where people are more fervent or strong about what they believe than religion. And if you don't believe the way they believe, you're going to hell. It's just that simple. I was there. I used to believe that. So even with religion, you can't change people's mind. You can't talk them out of what they think and convince them that what you think is true. Leave it alone. Live your life. And if you're living the kind of life you should be living, maybe it'll lead to something. Maybe it'll lead to questions. Maybe it'll lead to a conversation where they ask you more about it, okay? But this is true with politics, with COVID, with Black Lives Matter. This is true with anything. We need to just Stop trying to convince people to think the way we do because we think differently. That is never going to change. So just give it up. Just stop doing that. So why is it important to find common ground? This is what we have to do. The problem is common ground that we all have. We all have common ground. Number one, look, we're here right now today. We have the common ground of the fact that we want to be together to maybe learn from one another, to support one another, to encourage one another. That's common ground. But the problem in trying to find common ground right now is very, very difficult. I don't know that there's a bulldozer in the world that can just take off all the shit that has buried the common ground that would help us to find what we need to get along again. So, being a health coach, one thing I learned in helping people change their habits and all that is you can't get rid of old habits. You can't, it would be so nice if you just push a delete button and get rid of all the bad habits you have, right? But you know that's not true and it's not possible. So the best phrase I ever heard was, instead of working hard to get rid of bad habits, focus on creating new ones that will eventually make the old ones obsolete. This is what we have to do now. You're not just going to I can't give you any magical answers to stop feeling the way you feel, to stop making assumptions, to stop being judgmental. But I can give you some ideas on how to find common ground again. Because as you build on the common ground, all the shit that was on top will start to roll down and that mountain of common ground will become bigger and bigger. So why is common ground important? Common ground is important because it opens up a pathway of communication. Like, okay, here's something we can talk about. We can't talk about politics. We can't talk about pandemic, but here's something we can talk about, whether it's going on a vacation or whatever. It opens up a pathway to communication. Pathways to communication then lead to trust. Building trust then leads to the building of a friendship. And what happens when you take all those steps? What happens is that friendship can be established, and then the more difficult subjects in life can start to be approached. You can start to talk about them because now you experience a sense of freedom, and it's a freedom that allows you to be true and authentic. And I know that to be true because I have girlfriends, and one of them may be on here now. I didn't see everybody who entered, but she may be on here now. But we are at polar opposite ends of the political view, of our political views. But we have spent years building enough common ground that literally I talk to this woman minimum once a week. And probably in the past 5 years, we've talked about politics less times than I can count on one hand. Because we don't talk about that. We have enough common ground to fuel our friendship and to make it strong. But those 5 times that we did talk about politics, we could express our views, and no matter what the other one thought, we were respectful about the fact that the other person didn't agree with us at all, but this is how I feel. And she could say, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that. And I'm thankful that you shared that with me. And I can feel the same way. We don't have to agree, but not for a minute. I mean, we all think we're right. We all think we're right. And we get so passionate about it. And that's where we make assumptions. I don't know that I'm right. I know what I embrace. I know what I believe. Do any of us really, truly know that we're right? I know you think you do, but you don't. You don't. Because again, everybody can bring a lot of facts to the table that support what they believe, even though it's conflicting beliefs. So you don't. So this is why it's important to build that common ground, because then on the rare occasions where you do talk about those tough things, you can talk about it and feel safe with someone, even though they don't agree with you. That's pretty powerful. Okay, so how do we find it? So here we go. Now, this is the common sense stuff. This is the stuff pay attention to and start to do it just a little bit at a time, because this is how you successfully build in new habits. It's not to take a list a mile long and say, okay, these are all the things I'm going to do now every day. No, take 1 or 2 things, but just start. Just start. And then when you start, you'll start to build momentum, and then you'll want to do more, and then you'll want to do more, because you're going to see positive things come from it. And when you see those positive things come from it, face it, today, in today's climate, don't you want to feel a little bit better about life and about the world and about things? Because if all you're doing is focusing on all the crap that's been piled on top, you're not going to feel it. You're not going to feel peace or happiness at all. So if you want to find it, you have to start somewhere. So start somewhere. So start in the situation you're in. We're here. We're lady bosses. We have this in common, that we want to make our lives better. We want to support and encourage one another. We want to help one another. Maybe you meet somebody at church. They might have differing opinions and differing views on things, but you have church in common. What brought you here? Why do you come to this church? What did you grow up in this faith? Did you make changes in your life over your lifetime? Whatever. That's common ground. Wherever you find yourself with another human being, you automatically have the common ground that brought you both to that place. So talk about that. You're at a party. Hey, how do you know Susie? Common ground. So look for the common ground. Don't just go to a party and step into a circle of strangers who are talking about politics and move in to make your views known and, knowing that you're going to convince at least one of them to think differently. Find the common ground. Talk about that. When you're doing that, you're taking the focus off the things you disagree about. You have to make an attempt in the beginning to actually take the focus off the things you disagree about so that you can just start focusing on the things you have in common. So build on a bunch of topics, a bunch of different subjects that can strengthen your relationship. Talking about politics with somebody who doesn't feel the same way you do is never going to strengthen your relationship. It is just going to wear you both down. Even if you have that respect for one another, if that's all you talk about every time you're together, it's going to wear you down and make you tired, and you're not going to want to talk to them anymore. So build a variety of subjects you can talk about that take the focus off the things you disagree about. Things that can strengthen your relationship. And listen, these sound like just dumb little things, but they're not dumb little things. These are the things that make you start to strengthen the bonds you have with one another. But things like cuisine, like, oh my gosh, I went to a great Italian restaurant last night. You could talk about food for an hour with somebody or more. So, cuisine is something, sports, entertainment, hobbies. Remember, common ground is what builds this pathway to communication. That pathway to communication builds and develops a friendship. So these don't seem like important things, but these are where you find common ground. You want to talk about your pets. You want to talk about your kids. You want to talk about your family. Whatever it is, find the things you can talk about that are going to start to build that trust. So then you're going to see what's going to happen when you start to build that relationship and you really strengthen that friendship. You're going to start to see that not all their views are wrong and not all of your views are right. It's going to start to open up a world because you've really started to listen to what somebody else thinks about something on those hopefully rare occasions that the difficult topics are on the table. Because if you're really listening, then you're going to realize that there is validity, there is some value in what they're saying. You may not agree with it, but it starts to open your mind to realize, look, you might be right, I might be wrong, I don't know. This is still what I embrace, and I respect that that's what you embrace, but it's going to open up the possibility that maybe everything you think is not right and everything they think is not wrong. You learn to let go a little bit. And that's a big thing. That's a huge thing. And then, this is the big thing. I talked about the assumptions we make. And again, you assume that if I don't want to wear a mask, I don't care if people die. That's the assumption people are making. I make it, when I say it, when the words come out of my mouth, I think, that's like the most stupid thing I just said. Nobody would feel that way. But it's obvious when you scroll through social media, that's exactly what people think. They think, I don't care if people die if I don't want to wear a mask. So what happens if you build the common ground, if you come into a more trusting and a less combative place, you start to realize that even though you have opposing views, you actually want the same thing. Whether you want to wear a mask, whether you don't want a mask. We don't want people to die. We don't want people's lives to be affected in a way that's just going to be hard or impossible to recover from. We want the same thing. We want a better life for our family, for our friends. We're making assumptions that the other person is way out here and they're making the assumption we're way out here when really the core things we want are a safe world to raise our children in, a safe world for us to live in, a safe world for us to have good times with families and friends. And, you know, none of us want to be locked in our homes because of a pandemic. I mean, we want the same things. And the more we build the trust and the relationship, the more we will come to realize that. So, you know, we're not in the same, we don't have the same views, but bottom line, we'll find out we are much more in the same place than we realize. We're not going to realize that until we build on the common ground and start to establish the trust and the relationships. And then another tool in building common ground is stay current on current events. Have enough current events in your, you know, in your mind so that when you're talking to somebody, talk about without the conversation just gravitating toward all hot button items that are happening right now, because that's what's going to happen. If you're not prepared to talk about something else, then, you know, all the current events are so huge that they're like a giant magnet. You're just going to get sucked right back to them. And that's what people are going to talk about. So be prepared with current events. It doesn't have to be global current events. It could be local current events like, oh my gosh, did you see what's happening in Pottstown? We've got 2 new businesses coming into the terminal. And oh my gosh, do you know this woman, her and her husband, you know, are pastoring a local church that's like servicing the homeless people of Pottstown, and all the wonderful things that, like, they're such good people and they do wonderful things in the community. And be prepared with things to talk about that lessens the power of that magnet of current events to just suck you right in. You have to be prepared. So if you're going into a social situation and it's one that, you know, hey, we've got Thanksgiving coming up. Families have been divided over all this crap. I don't have to tell you that because probably every one of you knows somebody that this has happened to, and probably right in your own family. You probably know somebody in your family who's become so angry and is so convinced that you're all off your rocker. And why can't you agree with what I'm saying? That it's really splintered relationships. And that's not a good thing. So we all know that's happened. So coming into Thanksgiving, perfect time, but make sure you go prepared. Go prepared with more than a dozen things that you can start conversations about that will not cause people to gravitate toward all the crap going on right now. Okay, so you have to be prepared. So listen, bottom line, in closing, it's not a hard thing to do. Just like developing a good habit is not a hard thing to do. Is it hard for you to say, okay, starting today, I'm going to drink 1 extra glass of water every day? It's not that hard. And you know what? Maybe next week you add another glass of water every day. And before you know it, you've built it to a place where you're actually drinking the water your body needs in a day. This is the same thing. Just, oh my gosh, when you're talking to people, just look hard to find something you can talk about that has nothing to do with the things that are dividing us so horribly today. Because this is how we change the world. I've said it a million times. You've heard it a million times. It's nothing you don't know, but we're not doing it. We've got to start being more focused and start doing it more. It's that ripple effect. You start doing it and people leave a party because, oh my gosh, I really had fun tonight. Because you know what? We were down in the mud, just fighting and grueling and getting everything stirred up again. And I feel so sick because all we talked about was politics. Like, oh my gosh, we like really had a good time. Because you know what? None of that stuff even came up. So it causes that ripple effect when you start realizing and people start realizing how much more pleasant life is when you start to get to the common ground and then start to bury the crap with the common ground. It starts to feel really good. And that's how you change the world, ladies. One little step at a time, but it starts with you and it starts with me. And this is what we have to do. We have to make an effort to do this more. So I'm not saying do 100 things. I'm just saying do one. Just get started. Just do one. And it will start the snowball effect. And it can make a huge difference. So that's it for today. Good seeing you. Good spending Tuesday morning with you again. And I will see you next week. Have a great week. Bye, ladies.